What is going on, everybody? Bobby Fi here. I'm going to be just talking a little bit about this NBA slate. It's a small one. It's all at 5, so there's no swapping or anything. Hopefully, we'll have all the news in. Sheets and I will be live at 7 Eastern to go over this and the NFL slate tonight. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump on into it. So, all right, starting off with Brooklyn in New Orleans. I actually don't love a whole lot on the Brooklyn team. I wouldn't mind taking a stab at some of these plays just because they're going to be so low owned. But it's not the game that I'm the most interested in. Let me just pull up my other screen here real quick. Yeah, I mean, we're not getting the minutes out of if Ben Simmons plays, and I don't know. It feels like that could be a play, to get some at lower ownership. That's probably my favorite thing here. I don't mind the idea of Claxton, and I don't mind Schroeder, but I just think that there's other spots. Maybe I could talk myself into Cam Thomas a little bit later. Been a little bit disappointing at times, but I think it's reasonable to try and take, small slate. We want to try and, get some low ownership. Probably Simmons would be the one I have the most interested in. I'm just going to put a little note for myself here to make sure I have at least some of them. Because I do think he's got upside anyway at that price at 4,800. New Orleans. It's weird to see, every time you look at Alvarado priced like this, I just sort of always jumps back, but I mean, he's been good. He's put up 41 and 46 his last 2 games. The matchup is fine, not exceptional, not bad, not whatever. That's probably the highest level of interest I have over here. If you wanted to talk yourself into Brandon Ingram as a spend up, I have no problem with that. I didn't get to him when I was first trying to build some lineups by hand, but I don't mind it. Brandon Boston's been really good. This price has finally come up, and I think there's room at this price. So a lot of guys who I think are okay plays, but nobody who quite makes a priority list for me. And might have to revisit this one a little bit later because I do think this game ends up getting neglected, especially on the Brooklyn side. I don't think I'm going to get anything from the Clippers in this game at OKC. It feels like OKC should be able to control this one. I'm a little surprised that the spread's only 7. I thought it could actually be as high as 10. Clippers have played better than most people thought so far this year. Lots of competent role players, I guess you would say. But nothing that I feel extremely excited about overall. Just trying to get to anything on the Clippers side, to be honest with you. If I had to take a gamble on anything, it would be Harden, but nothing that I think I'm going to get to. Maybe you could talk yourself into Man as an additional value to the OKC stuff, but nothing I'm overwhelmingly excited about. So we have Chet out, and Isaiah Joe has been starting. It's been actually going back and forth between Isaiah and Joe and Wallace. I think either one of them will be a core play for me, depending on whichever one starts. And I like the other one as a tournament play. I think the ownership is actually going to be a little different than what it's being projected right now. Lou Dort at this price, I think this is where you're getting most of your value. You could argue for Caruso over Dort. I have Dort slightly ahead of Caruso, but it's pretty close. And then Shea is always a strong play. He's a reasonable price at 10K here. I feel like we can do it. But the thing is, he really hasn't been putting up those ceiling type of games this year. And, they just have a lot of other guys. Jalen Williams, I feel sort of the same way about Shea and Jalen Williams. They're both priced appropriately. Haven't really gone, crazy, especially in Shea's case recently. He had one huge game earlier in the year, but really it's been in the 40s for him. So I do have, Joe and Dort as my favorites, but I think you're probably looking at least 2 from OKC in most of your builds this evening. Sacramento and San Antonio. Yeah, you could talk me into Herder. I feel like I don't feel like we're supposed to be playing him as chalk in general. He did put up 41 in the last game. He put up 8 in the game before that and 18 in the game before that. So I don't want to overreact to one game and say, okay, we're gonna make Herder some sort of a priority here. I'm fine with Sabonis and Fox. I think if I had to give the edge to one, it would probably be Fox. There's a couple centers that I like that we'll get into in a minute. But I don't think that I need to do anything here. And it's kind of a funny slate because there's not a whole lot to really love or a whole lot of stands that I feel like make a ton of sense to me. So I'm trying to figure it out still. Obviously, it will be a little bit more clear when we go live at 7 Eastern. But as of right now, it's just not all that exciting to me of a slate. And a lot of these spend ups at this ownership, I just don't feel so strongly that we need to do anything. Now, the thing with DeRozan is you could argue that he's been good in revenge games in his past. Maybe that's something we could do, but it's not like he's the focal point entirely of their offense. I think that 7,700 is very reasonable. I think he's reasonable enough to get to 40. So I actually think that I would go with DeRozan as my favorite play from the Sacramento side if I had to pick one. Wemby has been a little bit of a disappointment both in fantasy and in real life this season. He did play really well in his last game against Utah, and he's always got the massive upside for the shot blocking and everything like that. I actually like the idea of trying to get to Wemby today because there is value, and we don't have a whole lot of studs to pay up for. There's a better one. There's some guys I like a little bit better as not spend all the way ups, but spend ups that I'll get to a little bit later. And nothing else is really doing it for me on the San Antonio side. So Wembanyama is really the only one strongly in consideration for me. Washington and Houston on the, like Washington plays one of the fastest paces. This Houston should probably crush them here, but they're probably still going to play their young guys and their core. Joe Val is looking like, they're bringing him off the bench and he's playing his minutes, but it's high variance to play it at as chalk. I just don't really think I really want to do much of anything here. If I had to do anything, I probably would talk myself into Jordan Poole, but I'm not getting to the Joe Val right now. Maybe he gets more minutes is the thinking, I guess, because of the Şengün on the other side factor. A lot to like on the Houston side. Obviously, it's a great matchup. Tari Eason, I think, is a really strong play at 4,800. Fred VanVleet, I think, makes sense. And these are, you can see I listed them as core plays. You don't necessarily need to play VanVleet and Şengün, but I would probably make sure to play at least one of them. And I think that Jalen Green, as always, and this is the kind of game where I could see Jalen Green scoring 40 real-life points. If there was a spot for him, this is probably the time to do it. So I'm probably playing at least 2 from Houston on almost all my lineups tonight. And that's the way I have it seen right now. But again, we'll get some news later on who's available for sure and all that stuff. Steven Adams, questionable, is actually a little bit of a factor because I really like Şengün, but they'll give Adams some minutes if he's available. Otherwise, Şengün should have it mostly to himself. All right, Bulls playing at the fastest pace in the NBA. Good spot for the Cavs on the road here. I do think you want to try to get at least one of Mitchell or Garland. I don't think you have to play them together, but I would try to get to at least one of them. I like this matchup for Jared Allen, and I like Evan Mobley here. So I'm very high on Cleveland. It feels like a Cleveland, Houston, OKC for value kind of a slate at first look. I think it's mostly what you're going to be doing in cash games as well. As I mentioned, I think I do think all of my lineups will have probably one of either Garland or Mitchell. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. And then I think that one of Mobley or Allen makes sense. I actually like Mobley a little bit better with the forward eligibility than I do Allen, but I totally get it why you'd want to play Allen in this matchup. Zach LaVine is probable. I think he's the best play on the Bulls tonight as a run back, and you hope they keep it close. The Cleveland's been obviously awesome. They're 11-0, incredible start to the season. I think LaVine at 6,800 is the one I could talk myself into on the Bulls side. There could be some potential, fringe value, I guess, if we get Jalen Smith, who was announced as a questionable just about an hour ago. But LaVine, I think, is a pretty strong play at 6,800, and maybe it makes for a nice little run back. So I would say that that's probably someone. I actually don't know if I should prioritize him, but I do think that I may end up by the time the day is done. We've got him. He came back from being out for a few games, played his 31 minutes. Assuming that he can get to up to 34 tonight, I think it's a very, very reasonable play. So it's a quick look. We'll be live a little bit later and go through the slate in more detail. And we'll talk through some builds and some NFL as well. Hope everybody has a wonderful